Good afternoon, everyone. Here we are back out on Nonsuch Island on the 10th of May, 2025, and we have JP Ruja, myself, and Rebecca, a special guest that's going to be joining us today. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing.
So I'm Rebecca Rogers. I'm a professor in bioinformatics and genomics at UNC Charlotte, and I met JP at the Plant and Animal Genome Conference, and I'm hoping to see if there are ways for me to help with projects on genome sequencing in the Bermuda Cahow that JP and Karika have been working on with BioQuest.
Okay, yeah, and obviously we have some who's your daddy type questions and everything that have arisen this season and such, and so yeah, we'll be very interested to find out that, because a lot of people have taken quite an interest in finding out who is the daddy for that. So yeah, let's go and see see how the chicks are doing anyway today.
No secrets with DNA.
Yeah, exactly.
Where are we going?
Okay, here,
Down
I'll
here?
go first. Yeah, just watch your head with the branches. Hi.
Look at this guy.
Not as heavy as I thought, but he's definitely in the full dust bunny stage.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, so he is actually believe it or not, one of the youngest cahows, one of the last ones to hatch in this entire colony.
Huh.
And took forever. He took 5 full days to break out of the shell. From start, the first little pips noted on the eggshell.
Quite the struggle.
To getting out. It was quite a struggle. We really thought it's not going to make it, but it did, and it's done well. And, his new mom, this is the first chick she's ever produced and ever had to feed. So we were really a bit worried about some of them take a few years to get it right. But after a slow start, she's really kicked in and she's making, regular, she's carrying out the bulk of the feeding visits, His being the normal, reliable, he gets them in, but she's probably making 3 feeding visits for every one that he is this year. And usually it's much more even. So and he's also a very quiet little guy.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to rip my
Way
fingers
more
off.
cooperative, yeah.
Oh, yeah. He is developing a bit of a tail bump now, so that's nice to see. And let's see if I can get him to stretch out the wings. When they're really full and happy, I see all the primaries, secondaries are all developing. You can see his feet are basically already at
Look at that.
full adult mode, size. You can see the scales on him and such. Yeah, it's looking really good. Just check the eyes, make sure there's no down impacted. Sometimes that happens. They can get eye infections.
Like an ingrown hair type?
Yeah, exactly. You get a big ball of down that gets jammed in behind their eye, and it can cause a really bad infection. Yeah. It's okay, mate. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the down is a real asset when they're young, and, when it's still winter and, they need to stay warm. I'm just trying to get a burr out of here so it doesn't get jammed in this down. But it becomes a liability when you get into mid-May and early June and it starts getting hot. And you saw the other ones. They're just 2 to 3 weeks older than this one, and they've already lost a large part of their down.
They look so different. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They go through this awkward period.
I had the same in middle school, so it's okay.
Yeah, so did I. It's complete with mullets and everything, mullet hair.
Or at least I didn't have a mullet.
Mutton chops and all the rest of sideburns, collars, like turkey vulture collars, type thing. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, some of the stuff. Yeah, well, it's definitely the heaviest it's ever been. He is, let's see, 387, so that's 367, yeah. So that is the heaviest it's been. 367, good. I mean, based on all the feeding visits I was seeing, I thought he might be approaching 400, but he's still very young. He's not anywhere near, the age at which they usually get their peak weight. There's another couple of weeks for him, so All right, so let's take a look at your wing cord. You can see it's very messy the way it come out. All the primaries, secondaries, coverts.
You're starting to grow in, but it's
yeah, still got a long way to go.
yeah.
But let's see. Yeah, it's longer than it looks. 145 mil. Yeah, it's funny. He's very advanced in some ways, but quite, still quite young in others. So 141. And plumage. It's literally just wings. I don't think there's any. There is a tail bump, but I don't think there's any facial feathers. The white, yeah, none yet. Not quite yet. Probably by next week he'll be developing the white facial feathers. Like we saw, I think all 3 of the chicks had to some extent today. Come on.
Hey, baby.
There we go. Let's just try. You want to feel what it's like? Yeah, just hold both of them together like a basket.
Yeah.
As long as he feels, and so he's using the wings to balance himself. There he goes. Yeah, once they get comfortable, he's pretty cool.
He's so cute.
So soft.
And it's like he's purring.
Yeah, it's like a cloud. Yeah, they do. They have this like rumbling vibration.
Baby.
Yeah. Okay, so everything looks good with the CahowCam2. Who's your daddy chick, more or less. You see he's getting a little restless now, but he's at a good weight. He's at the heaviest he's been. And, he's just past half-fledged now, so he's probably got about 5 or 6 weeks to go, more or less, before he's ready to fly out to sea. This is one of the youngest birds in the entire colony. So he hasn't even started to develop the white facial feathers yet. So we're going to see this bird really blossom in the next month or so. And we'll be following him with great interest. Particularly, we're still hoping to be able to have a vet take blood samples from him so that we can answer that big question that seems to be in everybody's mind now, to find out who the daddy is for this particular chick, because it's just a very unusual situation for a normally monogamous species to be in, and it'll be an interesting one to answer, I'm sure. We're going to see how it goes.
It'll be really exciting to see how the genomes can answer that question, especially with all the work that JP and Karika are doing over at Carry Genetics.
Yeah. And the chick is just like, hey man, I don't care. I just want to get back in my burrow.
Yeah, he just wants to have a good life.
That's right. Yeah. And if all goes well, this bird might still be going around doing his thing until, for the next 40 to 50 years or so.
He has no idea how famous he is, does he?
Yeah, he really doesn't. Look, he's just wanting to get on the ground.
Yes.
He's finally figuring out what to do with those wings, because a lot of them just don't know what to do with them. They don't know what they're for. And so he's finding out they're good props, to push them along. More or less just leg extensions. Okay, Guy. All right, so I think we're going to put him back in and reset the camera. And yeah, everything looks great. Okay. Come on.
Hey, buddy.
Normally I put him back in the bag, but we're going such a short distance, I think I'm just going to carry him right down. So, here we go. Come on. There we go. Okay, well, this, the genomics part of it really gives us an opportunity to figure out, with a really small population, starting from a very small number of pairs, to see the answer, either how inbred are they, perhaps, how much diversity, is there multiple lineages and such. And personally, for this, I would love to see how closely related, if at all, are the 2 adult males, first of all. See, is there any sort of relationship between them? Because then that could cause problems, going down the line. And B, you know, to see each chick, okay, the same thing, you know, to see if they're related in the first place, if, you know, one male is the same father for both of them. Obviously, that's the biggest question we'd like to answer. And if not, well, you know, make sure that that one actually comes from Samson, you know, and that, because that nest, it was a very unusual year. We had at least 3 other prospecting male birds that turned up in that nest at different times and
Very
such.
popular.
Yeah, it's a very popular nest, and I think the female, being a young bird that had only just started nesting with Samson, the original one, that perhaps she might have been a bit more open than normal. She, you know, the pair bond wasn't strong enough for her to just you know, reject out of sight, you know, what was going on, you know, the advances of other males. But just to find out how often this happens, I'm sure it must happen because they've been nesting for centuries in very close proximity to each other in these very, you know, limited habitats, nesting habitats. And there's obviously a lot of interaction going on between them. And, you know, it seems like genetically most of them are in pretty good shape. You know, there are multiple lineages, I think, but we just don't know. And for these ones, particularly Samson, who's one of our prize, I guess, prize bulls, you know, in the Cahow population, you know, to see, okay, what is, you know, what's the situation with him? He's never been, you know, we don't really know genetically what condition he's in. So yeah, that's the main thing. I mean, is to see what, you know, what we can find out from each of the adult males, but also see what we can also find out from the 2 chicks and everything from that. And who knows, maybe we'll be surprised and they do have different daddies and everything. But right now, yeah, it's taken on a life of its own. Everybody wants to know, well, who's the daddy sort of thing of this? And, you know, because it really upset our notions of, you know, we've always held the Cahow as a patagram of, you know, stable, monogamous, you know, they never mess around sort of thing. You know, pair stays together for life. That's generally the case, but obviously it's not this case in everything. I mean,
so it'll be interesting to see how the social monogamy plays out in the genetics, and whether or not they're actually genetically monogamous with their matings, and how often that happens across the entire population, not just with our little drama queens over here.
Exactly.
And then at the population level, I'm really interested to see how the patterns of genetic diversity have shifted as the population got very small and went through the bottleneck and then came back up. There are some predictions about bad things that happen when population sizes get very small. When your gene pool is small, you can have bad genetic variation limp along in the population and start to accumulate. You can also get these inbreeding effects, not because there are siblings that mate with each other necessarily, but just that there are so many cousins across the population. It's almost inevitable that you run into someone that is a close relative.
That's right.
And so I'm really interested to see how that shifts the patterns that we see in the DNA with all the genomes that JP and Karika have been trying to gather. So I think there are lots of open questions that impact conservation and the health of the species, as well as the individual patterns for these specific birds.
I mean, one of the things we've noticed is that there are some pairs that just are excellent producers of chicks. They're, you know, got 70% or higher breeding success over long periods of time, 10 or more years. And then you get other pairs that are just so-so, you know, they'll have a chick every other year or every 3rd year, you know. And then you get pairs that literally never produce chicks. They will stay together for, I've got a pair on one of the nesting islands that has been together since 2002. I banded them both as adults, so they were already at least 3 to 5 years old. 25 years later, they're still breeding together, and they've never produced a single chick.
Bless
not
their little
ever.
Hearts.
So perhaps, you know, that is a case where they're too closely related, and although they're still faithfully coming back to the same nest, it's all the only value they have is they're attracting perhaps young birds, new birds, to come to that colony site, and that's really the only. It's more of a social value, of just, there's activity going on over there. That's a good place to nest. Let's look for a nest over there. But that's something I've wondered, because it seems like only about a third of the nesting pairs are the ones that are driving the recovery of the species, because they're producing a disproportionate number of successfully fledging chicks.
We're happy to see their success, I know. But you can end up with some interesting dynamics when one part of the population starts to dominate so much in the species. Exactly. How do you keep all the genetic lineages alive, right?
Well, that's the thing.
So hopefully we can, with the new genome sequences, you might be able to check some of those questions. To actually,
tick some boxes, so to speak.
Yes. I'll be really interested to see what comes of it all. It's a really interesting project.
And perhaps, in the future, could, get more if, funding and such is available, we can get more blood samples taken, particularly for pairs of interest,
Yes.
Like there's a pair here, 834. They've been nesting together for 12 years. They've only produced 2 chicks, and both of those chicks have returned, and one's nesting here in Nonsuch, the other is nesting out on Green Island, I believe, and they're both producing chicks successfully. So it's a pair with terrible breeding success, but when they do produce a chick, it's usually the biggest and heaviest chick in the entire population that year, and they are proven survivors. They come back.
High quality.
High quality. So I guess they're sacrificing quantity for quality. I don't know. But why are they producing so few? Most of the eggs are just infertile. They show no sign of embryonic development at all. See, because I candle all the eggs as well to see, so I can confirm which ones begin fertile.
Yes.
And at what point do they fail?
Right.
So, we have that as well that we've been recording now for at least 6 or 7 years.
And then you can try to figure out if there's any way to help mitigate some of the attrition.
Exactly. There's some questions. Perhaps it has to do with levels of persistent organic pesticides in their bloodstream, because there's a couple of problem chemicals, DDT and DDE being one, and hexachlorobenzene, which is a real nasty one that's known to kill embryos and such, at mid-development, and that's what we're seeing in a lot of these eggs. So I don't know.
How would they be exposed to those if they're here on Nonsuch Island?
At sea, catching food and stuff, because they were agricultural chemicals, agrochemicals, and they all end up washing into rivers, into the estuaries, and out to sea, and they're still in the marine food chain, obviously. And the hexachlorobenzene, I think 50% of all cahows tested had it in their bloodstream, and 100% of cahows tested, was 96 samples that were taken, I think, by Leticia and Monica, and 100% of them had DDE in their system, which is the main breakdown component of DDT, and about a third of them had DDT in their system, probably from the North Equatorial flow from South America and the Southern Caribbean, where DDT is still being used, So these are the long-term impacts that are escalating elsewhere from that use. Absolutely, I mean, DDT was banned in North America way back, in 73, I think, 74, but it's still being used in huge quantity in Central America, South America, and parts of the Caribbean. So, and that, the North Equatorial flow goes into the Gulf Stream, which comes past us, and it just recirculates it around. It just takes a bit longer now. So, it's one of the biggest modern selective pressures to hit organisms really in our lifetime. It really is, and it those are forever chemicals, so they're going to be around for plainly centuries or millennia. So that is a long-term impact. It's certainly, these guys, the cahows, their breeding success is much lower than I'd like to see. We've never exceeded 60% breeding success. Most years it's anywhere from 48% to about 54%. And that's low. I mean, the tropic bird, for example, has average of 67 to 78% breeding success. On the same island. On the same island, But they're getting their food much more locally, whereas the cahows are going way, way out, to European waters and to Canadian waters and such, and off the east coast of the U.S., the northeast coast. So, they seem to be picking up much more in a way, and they're longer lived, so there's bioaccumulation happening as well.
There are genetic components to pesticide resistance. I think you might be able to use the genomes to look at those genes and whether or not they've changed in recent time. And whether or not that's helping, but we can see.
Okay, great.
It certainly happens in insects and other things.
Yeah, it's all interesting. It's the one thing I love, the fact we've been able to leverage new techniques, new technology through the life of this program, and such, and we're still wanting to do that because, there's always, even though it's successful, their population is increasing, their breeding success is not what I'd like to see.
It's still a little delicate, right?
Yeah, it's still delicate. It's still, despite our best efforts, I mean, we literally have managed almost every individual breeding pair individually for, 65 years now. And even with that, I cannot get their breeding success more than 60% on a really good year. I think 62% is the highest we ever achieved, and I was doing backflips then, about. But an average year is in the low 50s, very low 50s.
So we'll use every tool in the toolbox.
Yep, fantastic.
Including genomes, right, JP?
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, so onwards and upwards, and there's every question answered brings 10 new questions.
Exactly.
That's the fun thing.
We
about
never
science.
end up with nothing to do in science.
Yeah, that's it. It's constant. It's a constant adjusting based on new information.
Exploration.
So I'd like to just thank you for bearing with us all through this, and a lot of questions. I think we're going to be getting some interesting answers out of this. And who knows, maybe we can even finally answer the big question, who's these chicks' daddy, for God's sake. So from Rebecca, JP, and myself on Nonsuch Island in Bermuda on a beautiful May Day, May the 10th.
Incredible. Yeah.
Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.